Wouldn't be surprised if Jan, after that fantastic experience of delivering checkmate, the queen sacrifice, that he just wants to get right back in there. More of the same, a repeat. But he knows it's not going to be as easy second time round. And in Armageddon, there's that extra flavor of kind of needing to win at all costs. It adds a bit of pressure. So Jan, feeling confident, riding a high. But Maxime, it's up to him to do something different. E4, will we see another Najdorf, Robert?
Wow, apparently we have seen a Najdorf, an aggressive opening. And for Maxime, I think he's also happy to have the black pieces. After all, yesterday, he couldn't get anything going against Denis Lazovic. So now we have the start of a Sicilian where the players are playing for different ideas. We don't have a symmetrical pawn structure. The kings have yet to castle. And curious moment for Jan to pause. Tanya, I'm surprised that he's spending time, but the good news is he has time to use because of his bid.
Yeah, absolutely. And the two decisive games that they had in the Rapid, both were won by white. The last game played Najdorf by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave did not go too well, but it kind of was like a hybrid with Maxime going with G6, Bishop G7. He's doing none of that. Like you said, this is a more strategic Najdorf. The fight will be around the D5 square. And as soon as I say strategic, the H-pawn is up the board. Throw that strategy out of the window. We've got fireworks already, H4 coming in. What do we make of this? Wow, but he goes with development, David.
It feels a bit inconsistent from Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He said A, he threw the black H-pawn down the board, but he didn't say B. He didn't kick this white knight away, maybe reluctant to drive the white knight forward into this F5 square. And watch out for him, if he gets time at black, to control the knight by putting a pawn on G6, dominating this steed on G3. It is a target. It's just about whether Nepomniachtchi ends up having to retreat this knight or leaping forward. If he can jump forward successfully, he will do it. He will love life. But if he needs to retreat, not a good sign for white. And look at the clock situation. Maxime's been so speedy. Smacks of opening preparation. Nepomniachtchi, on the other hand, much, much slower. And with the white king castled on this flank, it means we will not see a repeat of that earlier game. No big attacks against the black king, which is yet to declare its intent. Robert, definitely an upgrade, considering the previous game for Vachier-Lagrave.
Well, it couldn't get any worse, that's for sure. He was blown off the board. He was moving his knights to their starting squares. But one of the big questions about this position, and in any Najdorf, is can black successfully play the move d6 to d5? Because that d6 pawn, it's a backwards pawn that white wants to barrel down on. And if you could play d5, the good news is you get rid of that potential weakness. You open up a diagonal for your dark square bishop in particular, but you also maybe leave some vulnerable pawns behind, namely the e5 pawn, which can become a target. So these are the central questions. And speaking of central squares, knight to d5, giving up a pawn temporarily. Wow, what's the follow-up here? Because loose pieces drop off, and yet Jan has not made his move.
Wow. Tactics already? Yeah, David, already. I was about to say that tactics on the board, and you said a pawn sacrifice, and he picks up the h5 pawn, so temporary one, but the computer, the Valbar, does not like it. What's wrong with knight takes pawn? It looks like the most natural move to me.
It's simply that pawn wasn't actually too relevant in the position. If anything, it's helped black. A bit like that Fallujah game with the checkmate. Getting rid of your pawns opens up lines for your own attack. Look at this black rook now, poised. And the bishop also on this diagonal. The white king is not feeling comfortable at all right now. It's also cost white 2 whole tempi, 2 moves to go forward with the knight and then retreat to take this pawn. And if you compared the quality just a few moves ago of the white e pawn versus the black h pawn, no way should you trade a central pawn for a flank pawn like that, opening up your opponent's rook. So I think just a step in the wrong direction, a misevaluation by Nepomniachtchi. He's not dead, it's not over, but wow, queen to c8, he's lining up, big threats. This arrow isn't mine, but white's only good move, according to the computer at least. Bishop takes g6, but look out. If you don't take this pawn, for black to strike on g2, the black queen is actually lining up against this h3 square as well. All hell is broken loose. It's chaos on the board. Robert, help me through. How should Nepomniachtchi even start trying to calculate this position?
Well, I think that the reason why bishop takes g6 even works is it looks like black is going to do the same thing. One of the big ideas is a sacrifice in front of the white king with bishop takes g2. But that white bishop, it can slide back now that there's no g6 pawn anymore. And in fact, white wins this game because the queen is kicked off the diagonal and the h3 pawn is defended. So this is a big tactical opportunity for Jan. In fact, we see it on the board. But look at what Maxime has responded with. Knight d4, bishop takes g2 doesn't work, but it might work on the next turn. That is the threat. The g6 bishop is hanging. And while the engine can be critical of the objective evaluation, when all you need is a draw, if this can force a draw, you're happy to play in this style. I think that the white king is very vulnerable. Tanya, I don't know if you're with me here, but how could you play this way from the white side? It looks too dangerous.
This is terrifying for white, and I absolutely love Maxime's last move, jumping in with that knight to d4. He barely took any time to make that move. Now the bishop on g6 is hanging because the d5 bishop doesn't hang anymore. You've taken control of the f5 square. So as you pointed out, bishop takes g2 is a massive threat right now. Not just that, also watch out, if you were to play a move like bishop h5, trying to block out the h line, trying to fight the threat of bishop takes pawn, bishop takes g2, the c2 pawn will be hanging then. The queen on c8, the knight on d4, all lined up, attacking the c2 pawn. You might fight on the king side, but your queen side's falling apart. Knight d4 is a star move, and Lan Nepomniachtchi is in big trouble, David.
Totally agreed. There's so many threats. He's trying to neutralize the threats now by trading pieces. A good move, good classical wisdom from Lan Nepomniachtchi. Again, this arrow indicating that black should be trading pieces off, and he does so. Remember, everyone at home, if you're being attacked, trade pieces, trade queens, just try to survive. The downside, as Tanya pointed out, you're losing a pawn. Now simply this pawn on c2, you were for a moment a pawn ahead, but that is a valuable pawn. White is stuck with these 3 flank pawns, which are going to take an age to ever march up the board. But watch out for black's central pawns to connect and dominate the whole midfield, the whole center of the board. This is just one-way traffic. Considering he just needs a draw, this is a dream for Vasily Graf. He's not only survived the opening, not only was he asking the questions, he's ahead on the clock now, and he's got the advantage on the board. Why not push forward for glory?
Yeah. And Robert, I didn't even realize the clock. I mean, this is crazy. Lan Nepomniachtchi is the one who had more time to start with. Now he's behind on the clock. It looks like Maxime has managed to pick up all the central pawns, giving up his flank pawns. The D pawn is moving forward. How do you see Jan fighting this one? How does he keep the game going?
And that's what he needs to do. I don't have an answer specifically, but generally, he needs to keep the game going and try to get a mutual time scramble, because that's the way he comes back in this position. He needs to win. He doesn't need to equalize, because let's say the way to equalize is trading off all the pieces and shaking hands, making a draw. A draw is a loss for the player with the white pieces in Armageddon. So how do you stir up some trouble? I don't think you rush it. A lot of people think when they have to win, they just go all in for an attack. They sacrifice pieces. Here, you just need to keep the game going somehow, because white has an outside pass pawn, this h3 pawn. So in certain endgames, that can be at the minimum a decoy, or at the best, it can become a passer and hard to stop.
For white right now, but I've got to say, what Maxime is doing. Central control. These pawns control everything. They dominate the board. And he's also marched his king out into the center. We normally say don't try this at home, but with queens off the board, you're unlikely to get checkmated. Now, knowing that a draw is sufficient, he's aiming to trade off the rooks. This was shut down, but watch out for these pawns advancing. I also love the fact that the king is going to support the pawns. The pawns are the pride and joy here, the foot soldiers, but the king is going to support them and just enforce their advance inexorably towards the promotion squares. And look at this, they're just going to steamroller everything in their way. The white bishop's now lost 2 full tempi. The black king is going to come. I'm itching for this move. The black f pawn's going to roll, and I just don't see anything for white to hope for here. Not just that, but he's reminding the white king that on these lines, look at this, the 2 black rooks still poised just in case you let your guard slip. So right now, Vasily Graf, it feels like only the clock or a blunder can trip him up. 4 minutes. Robert, you mentioned the time situation, lack of increment. Oof, it's going to become a race at some point. Do you think the position's easy, natural enough for Vasily Graf to play under time duress?
Well, a lot of his moves have been easy to this point, but look what's happening and look at the evaluation bar. The king is in the center, bishop h4, not an accurate response. And this white knight that was sitting on g3, it can hop forward, e4, maybe to c5. The center might collapse at any moment. So Tanya, as I look at this position, and wow, he takes a step back, which actually is the better option. I think that it's Maxime who needs to prove that he can stabilize here, because his king is in worse shape.
Yeah, because it just felt like you come back with the knight. You're actually inviting Black's e-pawn to move forward, and Maxime doesn't make the move. I think he's calculating what happens after White gives a couple of checks. F5 comes to mind. If you go forward with the king to e5, perhaps Bishop F4 check is the big threat. Watch out that D4 pawn is hanging with the knight and the rook on D1 lined up. So decision to be made in the center by Maxime, and it's not an easy one. He is going down on the clock once again for Lan Nepomniachtchi. There is a minute up right now. It's going to be a big scramble. It's going to be about who's got the faster mouse skills. Talking about that, what do we know about these two players? Who's faster on the mouse right now, David?
I think they're equally fast. Both are super speedy. Vasily Graf, when he's on form, he's so instinctive, but he's lost his rhythm. He didn't keep things simple. And your idea now on the board, Tanya, and the evaluation bar rising in White's favor, he overcomplicated it. He was trying to win King of the Hill, something we discussed yesterday, but this king's just walked into the lion's den. It's now a clear target. This pawn attacked 3 times due to the pin. And for Black, you're struggling to hold everything together. Moves come to mind like dropping the bishop back to f6 to defend this pawn, but suddenly there are other threats. This check is going to hit the Black king. Again, due to the pin, cannot be captured, and White's knight is going to soon snack on this central pawn. Multiple threats. Vasily Grafi's lost control on both board and clock, down to 2 minutes. He didn't keep things simple. He didn't trade off pieces. He went for the attack himself, and he let things slip. And now, okay, attacking the knight, but a check. This pawn surely is going to drop off. He's holding things together with his king. This is the bravest king I've seen in a long time.
Well, it gets an exclamation point. It was the best move, and White is just a couple coordinating moves away from winning that e4 pawn, as you said. Not so easy, and as I look at the clocks, I mean, White is well ahead, but look at this last move. The evaluation bar, it keeps going up and down. This is the clear best move, and there was no other choice. And as we look at the scorecard beneath the board, both players have made a couple questionable decisions, but they also keep finding these only moves when they must. And for Maxime in particular, that's important because he is the one who has to defend. His king is in the open. And Tanya, people like to think queens are off the board. It's an end game. This is a queenless middle game. A checkmate could happen, especially against that Black king.
Lan Nepomniachtchi has been on the receiving end of a checkmate with the king in the center against Jose Martinez. He might be the one delivering it today as well. And we see that the bishop from h4 has been pushed back. But as long as the e4 and the d3 pawn remain alive for Maxime, that gives Maxime a lot of chances. So Jan hasn't been successful in grabbing one of these 2 pawns. We're seeing inaccuracies. But you can't blame the players for that. There's no increment. It's high tension, high pressure. The loser of this match gets eliminated out of the Chessable Masters. Anything can happen, but I'm loving those 2 pawns. It's advantage Maxime right now.
Oh, those are the strongest pawns you'll ever see, not just the bravest king you'll ever see. Leading from the front, leading his army to victory. And this looked a dangerous move for Black because this walks into a check, a skewer, and this pawn drops. But after a check, the Black king simply steps out the way. And actually, we're going to see this play out on the board. The Black bishop's ready to poach on this knight as well. And actually, the more pieces disappear now, the quicker, the kind of safer it becomes as well. And yeah, I think he's going to at least bag the draw here. At the very minimum, I was going to say take off that knight. Was this a mouse slip? He's trying to remove the bishop instead, given a question mark. A bit of a mysterious move that, because now White blocks, and suddenly the Black king is under fire again. Suddenly pawn to b3 is going to be a nasty check. This one's turning. It's the time. It's the clock situation that's going to decide this game. A minute up for Nepomniachtchi and a pawn up now on the board. Black's pawns suddenly unable to progress.
Mistakes come in pairs, and sorry, Tanya, I was just going to say that several mistakes in a row from Maxime Vasylyov, including this last move to take this knight on c3. It was David's idea before, but Tanya, it's a bit too late at this stage.
Because what you really wanted was to force Jan to take it with the pawn. I thought he was going to grab it with the bishop, but Jan anyways takes it with the pawn. Now again, we saw the eval bar not approve of that. The knight is jumping in. It's coming on to c4 to start targeting that blockade on d2. Right now, rook takes pawn is the big threat, which doesn't allow Maxime to jump in just yet. Maxime's got to rush. He's touching the 1 minute mark. There is no increment. This will come down to flagging.
This position is one where there's a passed pawn on d3. White is up a pawn, but Black has the most impressive one. And you see the last couple moves from Black, they are great decisions. And another exclamation point given. This rook can go up to c4, maybe over to a4. It's just venturing forward and causing problems. White finally is pushing a pawn, but g4 now is loose in addition to the rook going to the queen side. So with so much pressure, with so much on the line for Lan Nepomniachtchi, things are going wrong on that 4th rank as black finally is active.
Oh, black is active, but white now putting his king on the edge of the board. This is counterintuitive. He's trying to set a trap. Do not take this pawn with the black rook, because suddenly the white knight, the white rook would have eliminated the black knight, and white would have trapped the opponent. Instead, he's aiming to remove the defender. White rook, if it's traded off, can no longer prevent the advance of this d pawn. It's going to be a race, but it looks like black is simply ahead. Black's pawn too close to touchdown. The knight is coming. The king is coming, but a mistake now by Vachier-Lagrave. White's pawns are running. Suddenly white's ahead.
And that's the point. The king was needed to stop those pawns, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave reacts. He knows he missed this idea. Lan Nepomniachtchi is back in the game. All Maxime had to do was jump in with the knight to attack the bishop, but he's one move too late. Can white just continue marching down the board with the g-pawn, ignore the bishop hanging on d2, Robert?
You absolutely can. As you see those arrows, that is what white should do. You can also first move the bishop back to safety, but look at the evaluation bar to the left of the board. Look at the trajectory of the game beneath the board. It was white being worse, then white being better, then suddenly white's completely winning after black was winning. The advantage has exchanged hands. Unfortunately, it's not changing anymore. White is winning. 2 passed pawns are better than 1.
And now Maxime, King David has to fall back, but it's too late. And that's it. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigns. The g-pawn is unstoppable. Maxime is eliminated. Lan Nepomniachtchi, with a big turnaround, takes the match. Wow, David, just unbelievable what we just witnessed.
Crazy stuff. So many turnaround